Hi, I'm Brian Schroff from Beyondware. We just released version 2.2 of Beyond Typicals. In this update, we've streamlined the way you can place and move 3D assets in your model. We've added some casual cyclists and scooters to the moving traffic. We've got some great new bridge elements and plenty of new example projects. Let's check them out. One of the most exciting additions to Beyond Typicals 2.2 is a new way to bring in placed 3D assets into your model. So previously, if you're familiar with bringing individual assets in, we had to go to our asset placement, turn on placement mode, make sure that the asset we wanted was tied to that particular section, and then turn on placement mode and bring them in that way. This is a bit more tedious than what we've got now, which is a drag and drop functionality. So you'll see when I go over to our asset tray here in the toolbar on the right, I can go ahead and bring in an asset as simply as dragging and dropping. So you see I get that hover message next to my cursor. It says click and drag. So I use my left click and drag it into the model, and I let go. And after I've let go, you see I can hover over our sections, and that will indicate which section you're about to drop that 3D asset to. Let's go ahead and put this no parking sign in this grass section here. So now I left click to place again. And you'll see now when I select that section, I get our Beyond Typical logo icons here below the Place 3D Assets. So it's a quick way to go ahead and see which of those assets are placed individually, and then clicking that logo allows you to make edits to that as well. So we've got some slider bars to go ahead and move horizontally or vertically those assets, and we can also rotate those using those as well. And you'll see over here on the left that if we needed to revert or manually type in any of those rotations or locations, we can go ahead and do that as well. So I can reset those to 0, 0, and 90 to get those back into place. If I want to remove that asset, we have the old way of clicking Remove Selected Asset, but you can also press Delete on your keyboard. So when you have that asset selected, you can press Delete, and if there are multiple placed assets in that section, it will switch to the next one, and you can make edits to those or press Delete for those as well. The new individual asset movement tool is also available for custom labels. So if I go to Custom Labels and place a label, I can also select that label similar to the asset and make those same transform adjustments like location and rotation. So here's an example of how being able to bring in and move around those assets a lot more easily is going to help you bring life to your model. So this is a light rail transit example project that I'll cover later in this video in a little more depth. But you'll see when I click this platform section, I've got a bunch of 3D assets placed on that section. So you'll see that most of them are pedestrians, but I've got a light pole and a planter box and plants. So it's pretty easy to do. Let's go ahead and show you how easy. So first, if I wanted to replace some of these pedestrians, I can go ahead and just click those and press delete. And then if I wanted to add any more, I can, let's say, type in static ped and go ahead and click and drag them from my asset tray and just start clicking and dragging and bringing in a few different pedestrians here. Now that we've got those placed, it's as easy as just clicking those icons to add some rotation, move them left and right, and get those pedestrians situated how I'd like to see them to represent a light rail transit platform. We've also got some new active transportation users in Beyond Typicals 2. So you'll see here under our bike lanes, we have the ability to now filter out between more of a hardcore cyclist and what we're calling a cruiser cyclist. So you'll see when we change this neighborhood greenway bike lane to have those cruiser cyclists, that we've got some more casual looking bikes moving up and down the bike lanes. We've also got scooters. So on our sidewalk section, you can go ahead and change your primary asset from a walking pedestrian to a scooter right there. And you'll see that we've got a few different scooter options for pedestrians coming down our walkways as well. We have some great new bridge components in version 2.2 of Beyond Typicals. You'll see here, this is one of our new example projects, the arch bridge example, that in the 42-inch barrier, this median barrier section, we've got a couple of substructure elements toggled on. One of those is that arch bridge. So when I toggle that off, you'll see what that consists of. We've also got this box girder wide 1 at the top there. I'll note we've also got a couple of other different styles of wide box girders in that pull-down list for substructures. And we've also got a cable bridge version of a substructure element as well. So this looks like it will need to be transformed a little bit, so we can go ahead and adjust the scale in the X direction. We can also move that up using our Y coordinate under external positioning. We can lengthen that out if we need to. And there we're able to represent a cable suspended bridge as well. Keep in mind that when you make changes to the section length, those arch and cable bridge styles will transform with the length. So you'll see that as those lengths get shorter, you might want to knock down a Y scale to make those look a little more realistic. We've also got a few new assets for bridges and Beyond Typicals. One of those here in this freeway bridge example project, you'll see what we're calling an old barrier. So that's basically this wall with railing on the outside of this typical section. I'll change the spacing so you can see those. We also have a couple of abutments that can be brought into your typical sections as assets. So you'll see here, this is our new rail bridge example project. When we select that middle section, we can see the two icons indicating the abutments that were placed in this example project. You can go ahead and replace that out and show you how easy it is to place one of our abutments. So I'll delete this asset, go to our assets tray, and let's pull in the other style of abutment here. And then we go ahead and drop that onto our model, and then we click on it to start making edits. So I'm going to first want to rotate this, and then over here in my asset placement box, I'll finish that off and make that 180 degrees. Then we can use our arrows on this tool to move that closer to being in place. And then we can adjust the scale on this abutment as well. So we can use the Y scale to make that narrower. Use the X scale to make it shorter, and use that Z scale to size it to fit our substructure elements and get it up to the top of the deck. I'll go ahead and give you a tour of the new example projects in version 2.2 of Beyond Typicals. The first of which here is the Neighborhood Greenway example project. I've covered this in a separate YouTube video where I describe how I've used stop bars to simulate cars slowing down over a speed hump, so feel free to go check that one out on YouTube. Similarly, we've got a dual highway tunnel project up on YouTube where I've used some earth layers and custom retaining wall components and free pipes to visualize a tunnel. And I've also got a parking lots example project that has its own video up on YouTube where I show you a couple of different styles of parking lots that you can build on the side of your typical section if your roadway improvement is next to a strip mall or a big box retail style of parking lot. We've also got a few new structural example projects. Here we've got our arch bridge example project where we're using metric units and some of our bridge components, including a wide box girder and that arch bridge substructure, as well as showing some traffic driving on the left side instead of the right. Here's a new freeway bridge example project. You'll see right away on this one we're using a black background, and we've adjusted our labels to have a white background with black text to achieve some higher contrast and better visibility of the bridge section here. In this example, we're also using a new asset. So you'll see here as a primary asset, we've got our old barrier, which is new to version 2.2, which consists of that concrete wall with a metal railing on top. And then also to represent some pipes being suspended from a substructure, we're using free pipes. So we can go ahead and see those in our section hierarchy. as when you're designing your roadway section that we don't have the underground pipes tab that we do with the road sections, that a free pipe is a good way to bring in those elements to your bridge sections. And then finally, underneath our median, we've got our substructure elements. So if I toggle those on and off, you'll see those. We've got on top our wide box girder. And we've also got beneath that our pier and our pier cap substructure elements. Here's another new freeway bridge example project. You'll see in this one, we've got a couple of our new bridge abutment assets here. So those are placed 3D assets in the model that have been scaled and transformed to fit the bridge and the substructure elements. I'll show you where those are. The first one here, when we click on the bridge median flat, we can see that Beyond Typical's icon is the far abutment. And when we click on the shoulder next to that median, we get the near abutment. As a reminder, if you look in your section hierarchy to see which of your sections have assets placed on them, we have this little triangle symbol in the section list to show you if one of those sections has a placed asset. So if at any time you're looking for assets in your model, it's a good place to start here and click on the sections with those assets. And now our Beyond Typicals logo will pop up where those assets exist on that section. So I'll go ahead and move this abutment out of the way and show you a little bit more of the bridge. We've got some substructure elements. So on the 42-inch barrier on the outside, that includes both outsides, we've got our steel girder substructure element. And we're also seeing that same steel girder substructure element on both of our common lanes and our median. This is our bridge and fill scenario example project. We created this one to show you that you can use our bridge elements and our roadway section elements in the same scene. So we just simply drug those elements from the individual road and bridge section trays into the model and separated those out with an invisible section that we set to 30 feet wide. We do acknowledge there are some limitations today with Beyond Typicals in showing a bridge over a roadway in a scene, but we do envision in the future that perhaps be a combination of using our phasing, for instance, putting a bridge section in one phase and a roadway section in another phase, and maybe using our layout mode to turn the bridge or the roadway 90 degrees to have that traffic moving perpendicularly over and under each other. So stay tuned. That is something we are currently evaluating and hopefully we'll be incorporating in a future update. And lastly, for the new bridge example projects in Beyond Typicals 2.2, we have this rail bridge example project. This one has a lot of unique features. The first of which is the ballpoint pen scene effect is toggled on. You'll see this adds kind of a blue line on white paper effect to your model. I'll show you what that looks like when we turn these sliders all the way up. You'll see we get a full blue line on white spiral notebook scene effect. I'll turn that off to talk about some of the other features here. You'll see when I select the middle section, we've got a couple of placed assets associated on that section. Those are the other style of bridge abutment that's new to Beyond Typicals 2.2. I can move those out of the way and show you the bridge substructure here. You'll see each of these sections has a concrete girder below that. But most uniquely, you'll notice that we've got a freight train moving down a bridge section, and yet none of our bridge sections come pre-associated with rail. So what we were able to do is use some of the customization power of Beyond Typicals to mimic that. And what we could do was take some common lanes and adjust the texturing from asphalt to gravel. I'll show you what that common lane looks like when you bring that in. Normally, we've got an asphalt texture, it's 12 feet wide, and we've got a primary asset of all traffic. So simply by turning that primary asset to none, changing the width to something narrower, getting rid of the striping on the outside, and adjusting the texture to gravel, we're able to create something similar to what's shown in this example project. And then between those common lanes, we have curb that is just textured as metal. And then finally, this middle section here, instead of having moving traffic or no asset, we've set the primary asset to the train asset, which will put in a moving train down your section similar to some of the other rail sections in our roadway elements. By default, you'll notice that the bridge lanes, for example, I'll show the bridge lane end here. These don't have train as a primary asset, but a way to add that moving train to the list of assets to get that to show up in other sections that you might want. Simply find the section you want the train to appear in. You can then click the tree icon here in the bottom left under the sections menu, and that will bring up this customizing section assets list here at the bottom for that section type. So for instance, for this bridge lane end section, I can search this list and find train. And if I'm having trouble finding anything and you know the name of it, you can type it in this list down here. So then that filters that list out, and then you can toggle things on or off. And now that that's toggled on for this bridge lane end, I can choose that as a primary asset in my drop-down list. In our LRT, or Light Rail Transit Complete Street project, you'll see we've got quite a bit going on. That includes our light rail tracks, a train station platform that's basically a repurposed bus stop section, some retaining walls, sidewalks, raised bikeways, amenity zones, angled parking, and general purpose lanes. So I'll give you a tour of all of those, but first I'll show you that we've got a couple of phases. First being the sideboarding train station, where we've got the platforms on the outside and the tracks in the middle, as well as a centerboarding station option where those tracks are outside of kind of a combined platform in the middle. So I'll go over to the sideboarding one to show you kind of left to right. We've got a sidewalk and an amenity zone, which is basically a sidewalk with a brick pattern. I will note that you'll notice we've got a few different repeating assets down this section. That includes our beech tree 5 and the tree grate. And in order to get those light poles into both of these amenity zone sections, I used the adjacent sections secondary assets. So you'll see here for the bike lane, I've got a secondary asset of the streetlight 3 and use the external horizontal offset to move that into the adjacent section. Our angled parking is basically just a wider parking lane with the asset of static vehicles rotated 30 degrees. And then in our sidewalk, you'll notice if you zoom in, we've got this tactile warning strip down the side. That is basically another asset that we can bring down the spacing and bring up the scaling and have that repeat as one continuous strip that helps blind pedestrians as they're caning down the sidewalk be able to feel the edge of the walkway and make sure they don't encroach into the bikeway. Then here, I'll show you in the hierarchy, we've got around our retaining wall custom, which is a 0-foot section, I've got two invisible sections here. Those are set to 0.75 feet or 9 inches on either side. That's because this wall is 0 feet in width in actuality. So if we were to delete that section, you'll see that the retaining wall piece is 18 inches wide, and that way we don't have anything overlapping. If I bring that back and delete the invisible sections, you'll see that that 18-inch wide retaining wall is now overlapping part of our bus stop platform and the sidewalk. So those invisible sections are there to create that physical separation, to have the other components next to that 0-foot wide wall representative of their correct width. So that brings us to our train station platform. As I showed earlier, we have a bunch of placed assets. Those are mostly pedestrians and light poles and planters, but this is a repurposed bus stop section. So you'll see I've got that bus stop asset there, and I played around with the spacing and the X scaling to elongate that and make it look more like a train station shelter with a nice long bench and a roof that covers the whole platform. I've also got some custom labels as well. So you'll see when I move this label here, I'm covering up a sign that's built into that bus shelter that says City Bus Stop. And since it's a light rail stop, I wanted to cover that up and figured what a great way to use our custom labeling feature. So I dropped that in there and was able to use our transform here to place that just in front of that, and also add some branding to the project. So then we've also got our trains stopping here. I'll go ahead and show the stop bars with our traffic override. So now that I've shown those, you'll see that I've got the stop bars located at the far end of each of the platforms. And I've also got some pretty long intersection timings for stages to show a nice long period for the trains to do boarding and alighting. The stop bar timing group for each of these is 2 and 4. You'll see those are really short stages in our timings. That's basically just to give a quick green light to get that train moving again. And then our stages 1 and 3 are set to 20 seconds to add to the length in which those trains would be stopped. Moving further right, you'll see we've got a symmetric section compared to the left side. So again, we've got that sidewalk with the detectable warning strip, raised bikeways, amenity zones, curbs, angled parking, etc. Over on the far right, we've got one of our new urban buildings that's tagged to our buildings large segment. When I brought this in, I noticed that its scale was a bit small, so I positioned it next to the sidewalk and realized that the doorways were shorter than the people walking next to it. So I went ahead and scaled it up. As I undo those changes, scaled it up to about 2.15 seemed about right, and used our new asset placement tool to move that into place. Here's another example project to walk through some construction staging options using some of the visualization tools of Beyond Typicals. You'll see I start at an existing conditions with 2 lanes in each direction and end at a road diet that adds in some protected bikeways there. You also see I've got some custom labels up here to describe some of the key components of those phases. But starting at existing conditions, you see we've got 2 lanes in each direction. Just environment-wise, you'll see I've got kind of a black outer gradient to help with kind of a vignette look on the model. And then moving to stage 1, you'll see I'm capitalizing on some of the highlight and lane arrow features to show some milled surface, some full pavement removal, and maintaining 1 lane in each direction. And those notes are added here. See, I've used some of our texture abilities for pro users to make certain layers of that pavement section transparent, and also showing a milled surface. So you'll see I've got 2 layers of asphalt for my road. That way I can turn off that top layer to show a milled surface for those middle lanes that we would want to keep the most of that asphalt for. So moving on to stage 2, you'll see we flipped the traffic. We've built out our protected bikeways. We've got our notes indicating the work in stage 2. At stage 3, we've completed those bikeways, showing still the milled surface with traffic being shifted to the outside next to those new curbs. And then our final improvement where we've got the asphalt overlay and our final pavement markings. I set this example project up to look really nice in a layout mode. So I'll go ahead and enter layout so you can see that. I will add these phases to the project here. And I've also preset a camera. So I've got a layout mode, pan down camera. So once you're in layout mode, it's moving that camera all the way up to those existing conditions and walking down. I will note that I think by default, it's turning on the labels for each of those phases that you add. But if we turn that off, you'll see that these notes do a good job of showing the user or the viewer which stage they're looking at and what's happening in those stages. I've also got another camera mode, so it's the same kind of layout pan, but you'll see for our pro users, we can add in scene effects, and when we save those cameras, like this blueprint background that I've got here, that also saves with your cameras. So a lot of great functionality by being able to save your cameras for your projects. Here's another new example project to BT 2.2. This one I started creating back when we started adding in the traffic stopping functionality. I was really hoping to capture a safe routes to school type improvement where we can perhaps remove some parking or narrow some lanes to create a pedestrian refuge island to make a safer crosswalk for children as they get to school. So you'll see over there, I've got a public building 3D asset pulled in. I've also got some elements of sidewalk and empty pavement to kind of represent a drop-off area in front of the school. I've got some trees that have some randomization with sizes, a fence, some sidewalk, a parking lane, etc. So you'll see I've got a few different phases here as well. I wanted to create kind of a 3-lane option or context of the project and a 5-lane context of a project. So you'll see those are built in here. And then I wanted to show kind of a before and after. So a before of that 3-lane and an after, keeping kind of the same curb lines and operations, but bumping out our parking lanes, adding in a pedestrian refuge island. You'll see I've got a lot of placed assets there, like the tactile pavers, the island itself, these vertical delineators, and some static children pedestrians. Ultimately, I think in the future, if we're ever able to get lateral moving traffic, this would be a good one to revisit. We could maybe try to show some pedestrians walking left and right across the model, but we'll see for the future. So I'll go ahead and show you the after for the 5-lane section as well, just being a more arterial type street with a lot more traffic. I thought it would be more appropriate to show some flashing RRFBs. And you'll see that in those after versions, I've got some stop bars programmed in just to represent, we don't have traffic moving across, but we could potentially represent what it would be like for pedestrians to find gaps and cross a narrower section than the before version. One thing I want to highlight is the saved cameras in this project. You'll see I've saved quite a few and I've set them up so that they fit better for the 3 or the 5-lane options. You'll see for the 3-lane, I've pre-programmed a low angle free mode as well as a low angle pan. So if you activate the pan or orbit camera mode and then save the camera, you can reload that camera position and movement when you reload that camera. I've also got a high center free version and a high orbit. And then when I move over to my 5-lane, I've got a 5-lane low angle position as well as a low angle pan programmed for that one as well. So again, I wanted to show off that there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with cameras, and it's a good idea when you find one, go ahead and save it, which includes pans and orbits in addition to your free positions. So that's it for all the new features and example projects with version 2.2. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to go get the latest patch either via the Epic Games Launcher or by downloading the latest zip folder from beyondware.com/download. As always, if you have any questions about Beyond Typicals or would like to offer feedback, you can email me at brian@beyondware.com. Thanks for watching.